Kingston, Jamaica, March 1978. Bob Marley walked into St. Joseph's Hospital carrying his guitar. He was there to brighten a sick child's day with music. Then he met Sarah, a frail 14-year-old girl with hollowed eyes. She looked directly at him and whispered something that made his blood run cold. The exact words his father had spoken to him on his deathbed. Words Bob had never shared with anyone, not even his closest friends. What happened next would unravel a mystery connecting Bob's hidden past to this dying girl in ways that seemed impossible. The more he tried to understand how she knew, the deeper the conspiracy became. Everyone who might have answers was either dead, missing, or pretending they'd never heard those words. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching. Someone who needed that secret buried forever. The girl's name was Sarah Mitchell. She lay in the children's ward surrounded by drawings of birds and flowers. Bob barely noticed the decorations. His mind was spinning with impossible questions. How could this child know about the Three Rivers meeting at dawn? Those were his father Norval's exact words from 1955. Bob had been just 10 years old, sitting alone with his dying father in that cramped room in 9 Mile. What was really going on here? Bob's hand shook as he sat down beside Sarah's bed. He tried to keep his voice steady. "Where did you hear those words?" Sarah just smiled. It was a strange smile, too knowing for someone her age. "I've been having dreams," she whispered. "There's this tall white man with your eyes. He keeps repeating those words over and over, like he needs someone to remember them." The way she described his father made Bob's skin crawl. The scar on his left hand, the way he hummed before speaking. She knew details Bob had never told anyone. He noticed the nurse in the doorway. She was watching them with a weird expression, almost like she was scared, like she regretted setting this up. Then Sarah grabbed his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so sick. She pulled him closer. "There are people who don't want you to know the truth," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "About your father's death." It wasn't natural like everyone thinks. Before Bob could ask what she meant, a doctor burst into the room. His smile was too wide. His eyes were too sharp. "Visiting hours are over," he announced. "Sarah needs her rest." But Bob saw the way the doctor looked at Sarah. It wasn't concern. It was more like a warning. Why was everyone acting so strange? Bob left the hospital in a daze. His guitar hung forgotten on his back. As he walked to his car, he spotted a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted so dark he couldn't see inside. But he felt it. Someone was watching him. The car didn't move. Not even when Bob sat in his own vehicle for 10 minutes trying to process everything. That night, sleep was impossible. Bob went to his studio instead. He pulled out the small lockbox he kept hidden there. Inside were the few items his father had left him. A faded photograph, a broken pocket watch, and a letter. The letter was sealed with red wax. His father had made him promise never to open it until the time was right. That was 23 years ago. Bob had kept that promise all this time. But now, holding it in his hands, he noticed something he'd missed before. The wax seal had a symbol pressed into it. 3 wavy lines. They looked exactly like 3 rivers meeting. Who was behind all this? Bob's hands trembled as he broke the seal. The wax crumbled away after so many years. Inside was a single page in his father's careful handwriting. But the words didn't make sense. "When the bird sings the truth, look to the stones where we planted hope. The third daughter knows what the first son forgot. Remember, Robert, some chains are meant to be broken, but breaking them comes with a price that could cost everything you love." The letter was dated 3 days before his father's death. Certain words were pressed harder into the paper, like Norval had been afraid when he wrote it. But afraid of what? Bob read it again and again. Each time he found more questions instead of answers. What were the stones where we planted hope? And who was this third daughter his father mentioned? As far as Bob knew, Norval only had him. Maybe a few other children he'd never acknowledged. But no daughters in the family records. Right then, the phone rang. The sound was jarring in the quiet morning. Bob answered. A man's voice came through. It sounded distorted, like he was speaking through cloth. "Stop asking questions about Sarah Mitchell. Forget what she said. Never open that letter again." How did they know? Bob hadn't told anyone about the hospital visit. He hadn't mentioned the letter to a soul. Yet somehow these people knew everything. The voice continued. "Your father made a choice. Don't make us give you the same choice." The line went dead. Bob stood there alone in his studio. His pulse raced. What choice had his father been forced to make? And what had it cost him? Bob made a decision right then. He would find out the truth, no matter how dangerous it got. If his father had been murdered, Bob owed it to him to uncover why. And he owed it to Sarah too, that dying girl who somehow carried his father's last words. The next morning, Bob tried to return to St. Joseph's Hospital. But everything had changed. The nurse who'd called him, who'd arranged the visit with Sarah, had disappeared. When he asked for her by name, the hospital staff looked confused. No one by that name has ever worked here, they said. Their faces showed genuine confusion, not rehearsed lies, which made it even stranger. How could a woman who'd worked there yesterday simply not exist in their records? Bob demanded to see Sarah Mitchell. The head nurse checked the patient registry. Then she looked at him with sympathetic concern. "We have no patient by that name," she said. "We've never had a patient by that name. Would you like to sit down? You look unwell." Bob knew what he'd seen. Sarah was real. He pushed past the nurses toward the children's ward. His chest felt tight, but when he reached the room, a different child was there. A boy with a broken leg stared at Bob with startled eyes. Who was this girl? Bob stood in the hospital corridor. He felt like he was losing his mind. Then he noticed something on the windowsill. A small drawing. It showed 3 rivers meeting, done in the same colored pencils as the artwork around Sarah's bed. Bob picked it up. On the back, written in childish handwriting, "They moved me. Find the silk cotton tree." Had she known they would erase her from the records? Bob pocketed the drawing and left. He ignored the concerned calls from the staff. When he reached his car, that same black sedan was there. Different spot, but unmistakable. This time when Bob stared at it, the car started. It drove away slowly, deliberately, like the driver wanted Bob to know he was being followed. The silk cotton tree. Bob knew exactly which one Sarah meant. There was only one that mattered in his father's stories. The massive ancient tree in 9 Mile, near the old property where Norval had owned land. His father used to take him there as a child. They'd sit under its branches. Norval would tell him stories about ancestors and promises and the weight of truth. But Bob hadn't been back since the funeral. The thought of going there now filled him with dread. Why did he feel that way? Against every instinct, Bob drove to 9 Mile the next morning. He took back roads, checked his mirror constantly for the sedan. The journey gave him time to think about his father's letter. About the 3rd daughter, who supposedly knew what the first son forgot. Bob was the first son. Maybe the only son Norval had acknowledged. So what had he forgotten? Or rather, what had he never been told? The more Bob thought about it, the stranger it seemed. He knew so little about his father's life, what Norval did during those long absences, why a white overseer would marry a black woman in the 1940s when it was dangerous, whether the story of his parents' meeting had always been a lie. When Bob reached 9 Mile, the village felt different, smaller than he remembered. The houses more weathered. Several older villagers watched him. They looked at him like they knew something he didn't. Pity, maybe. Like they understood something about his life that he hadn't figured out yet. As Bob parked near the silk cotton tree, an elderly woman emerged from a nearby house. Her face was deeply lined, but her eyes were sharp. "Robert," she called out. Not Bob. Robert, his childhood name. "I've been waiting for you," she said. "I knew you'd come eventually. Come inside. What I have to tell you will take time, and it's not safe to speak of such things out in the open." Bob followed the woman into her small house. His instincts were torn between curiosity and caution. They sat at her worn wooden table. "I'm Miss Martha," she said. "I was your father's housekeeper back in the 40s and 50s. Back when things were very different." She kept glancing toward the window nervously. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Your father was involved in something dangerous during his last years, something connected to land disputes and old family secrets. There were powerful people who wanted him silenced, people who threatened his children if he didn't keep quiet." Bob leaned forward. His pulse quickened. "Was my father murdered?" Miss Martha's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly. "It wasn't a heart attack. On the night he died, 2 men came to his house. I'd seen them before, lurking around the property. I heard raised voices, your father shouting something about protecting his children. Then there was this terrible silence." She paused, wiping her eyes. "When I finally dared to enter the room, Norval was on the floor. Already gone. The men had disappeared, but one of them left something behind." Miss Martha stood with trembling hands. She went to her cupboard. There was a hidden compartment Bob never would have noticed. She pulled out a small envelope. "I've kept this for 23 years, she said. "I promised Norval I'd never speak of it, unless his son came asking the right questions." She handed Bob the envelope. Inside was a faded photograph. It showed his father standing with a young woman Bob had never seen before. The woman was holding a baby. Bob turned the photograph over. On the back, in his father's handwriting, were 3 names, but the ink had faded. Bob could only make out 2 clearly: Norval and Catherine. The third name was too blurred to read. Could this be connected to Sarah somehow? Miss Martha spoke again. Her voice was shaking now. That woman was Catherine. She was the daughter of a very wealthy family, the Rousseau family. Her relationship with your father was forbidden. When she got pregnant, her family tried to force her to give up the child, but Norval fought for them. He threatened to expose certain business dealings, illegal things the Rousseaus were involved in. That's what got him killed. His knowledge made him too dangerous. Bob felt like the ground was shifting beneath him.
What happened to the child?
"I don't know," Miss Martha admitted. "Catherine died not long after this photo was taken. I heard the baby was given up for adoption. Your father tried to keep track of the child, set up some kind of trust, but the Rousseaus made it very difficult. They wanted all connection to Norval erased." She gripped Bob's hand urgently. "You need to be careful. The families who controlled 9 Mile back then still have power now. They still have reasons to keep old scandals buried. Take the photograph. Find out what you can, but please be careful." Bob left Miss Martha's house with more questions than answers. The photograph was hidden in his jacket. That black sedan was waiting at the village edge. They'd followed him. They'd known exactly where he was going. Bob drove through winding back roads trying to lose them. After an hour, he finally seemed to succeed. He stopped at a small shop to use the phone. He called his closest friend, his bandmate, but the man's voice sounded strange. Strained. "Some people came by asking about you," he said carefully. "Wanting to know about your recent activities? Maybe you should lay low for a while." The way he said it told Bob everything. Even his inner circle had been compromised. When Bob finally made it back to Kingston that night, something was wrong. His house on Hope Road had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but everything had been carefully searched, then put back almost exactly as it was. Almost a drawer slightly open. A book moved on a shelf. They'd been looking for his father's letter. The photograph. Any evidence connecting him to Sarah. Bob was grateful he'd kept those items with him. But the violation filled him with cold fury. They'd been in his children's rooms. They'd touched his wife's things. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe. Bob sat up all night studying the photograph. He noticed something in the background. A building with a partially visible sign. St. Agnes. Bob remembered hearing about St. Agnes Home for Unwed Mothers. It had operated in Kingston during the 1940s and 50s. Wealthy families sent their daughters there to have babies in secret. Maybe that's where this child was born. Maybe there were records. Then Bob heard something outside. The crunch of gravel. He moved to the window carefully. A figure stood at the edge of his property, just standing there, watching his house. The stillness was unnerving. This person could wait all night if necessary. At dawn, Bob left a note for Rita. "Take the children to your mother's house." He had business to handle, Rita protested, but something in his eyes convinced her. Bob watched them drive away. Relief mixed with fear. He was protecting them, but also isolating himself. Was this exactly what his enemies wanted? Bob spent that day in the city archives, hours in dusty files. Finally, he found what he was looking for. A birth certificate. Sarah Catherine Marley, born April 15, 1964. Mother, Catherine Rousseau. Father, Norval Marley. There was his father's signature. The same handwriting from the letter. It was real. All of it was real, but there was a note attached. Written by a social worker. Catherine Rousseau died in childbirth. Baby Sarah placed with adoptive family, the Mitchells, under closed adoption. Father, Norval Marley, requested regular updates on child's welfare. Trust fund established for education. So Sarah Mitchell was Norval's daughter. She'd been adopted, but somehow she knew about their father. Maybe her adoptive parents had told her. Or maybe, like Bob, she'd been having dreams, visions of a father she'd never known. Bob dug deeper into the records. The Rousseau family, one of the oldest and wealthiest families in Jamaica, ties to colonial plantations, current connections to government officials and business leaders. They controlled significant portions of Kingston's land and resources. Suddenly, the conspiracy made perfect sense. If it became public that Norval Marley had fathered Catherine Rousseau's child, questions would be raised about Catherine's death. About Norval's death, it could expose decades of family secrets, illegal land grabs, maybe murders. The Rousseau family's reputation would be destroyed. Bob realized he was holding evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful families in Jamaica. That's why they'd killed his father. That's why they were watching Sarah. That's why they were threatening him now. But Bob also realized something else. He had power. He had proof. And if anything happened to him, he could arrange for this information to go public. Maybe that was his only protection. Bob made copies of everything. He distributed them to 3 people he trusted with his life: his lawyer, his producer, a journalist friend who took on powerful interests. If anything happens to me or my family, Bob told each of them, publish everything. The journalist's eyes went wide reading the documents. You're playing with fire, he whispered. The Rousseau family has destroyed people for less. But he agreed to be Bob's insurance policy. Now Bob needed to find Sarah. He needed to see her again. Tell her what he'd learned. Give her the chance to know her true history before it was too late. Because according to Miss Martha, Sarah's cancer was advanced. She might not have much time left. Bob tracked down Sarah's location through a contact at the hospital. She'd been moved to a private clinic on the outskirts of Kingston, a facility owned by the Rousseau Medical Foundation. Bob's blood went cold. Sarah hadn't been moved for better care. She'd been moved to be isolated, controlled, kept away from anyone who might ask questions. Was her cancer even real, or was it something else? Something that would ensure she died quietly before she could reveal what she knew? That night, Bob broke into the clinic. He used skills from growing up in Trenchtown, picking the lock on a side door, moving through the dark hallways as quietly as he could. His chest was tight, but he kept moving. He made it to Sarah's room. She was asleep, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed. She looked even frailer than before, as if she'd aged years in just days. Sarah's eyes opened. There was no surprise in them, like she'd been expecting him. "Bob?" she whispered with a slight smile. Bob sat beside her bed. He started to tell her everything. About their father, about the Rousseaus, but then he stopped, because there was something he needed to ask first. Something more important than all the history and conspiracy. "Sarah," he said quietly, "do you know who your real parents were?" She looked at him for a long moment. "I know my mother died when I was born. And I know my father's name was Norval. My adoptive parents told me when I was 12. They said he was a good man who loved me, that he tried to stay in my life, but powerful people wouldn't let him." Tears formed in her eyes. "That's why I've been having the dreams. I think he's trying to tell me something. Through you." Bob's throat went tight. "Sarah, I think Norval was my father too." The words just hung there between them. Sarah's eyes widened. "You're my brother?" "Half-brother, yeah. And I think the people who killed our father are the same people who put you in this clinic." "I don't think you have cancer, Sarah. I think they've been poisoning you, keeping you sick and scared and quiet." Sarah squeezed his hand. "The medication here is different. It makes me so tired, so foggy. I tried to refuse it, but the nurses insist. They say it's for the cancer. But Bob, I don't feel like it's helping. I feel worse." Bob made a decision. "We're getting you out of here. Right now." He helped Sarah out of bed, disconnected the IV lines. She was unsteady on her feet, but determined. They moved through the dark clinic. Bob supported her weight. They were almost at the side door when they heard voices. Footsteps coming down the hallway. Bob pulled Sarah into a supply closet. They held their breath as 2 security guards passed by. One of them spoke into a radio. "The girl's room is empty." Suddenly, alarms began to blare throughout the building. Bob knew they had minutes at most. He looked at Sarah. "I'm going to lead them away. There's a side door at the end of this hall. When you hear me making noise in the other direction, you run. There's a taxi waiting outside. I arranged it. Go to this address." He pressed a piece of paper into her hand. "My lawyer will be there. Tell him everything. Make an official statement. If anything happens to me, he'll know what to do." "I'm not leaving you," Sarah protested. Bob was already moving toward the door. One love, he whispered. Their father's philosophy. Their shared inheritance, then he was gone, running down the hallway, making as much noise as possible. Drawing the guards away from Sarah's location, Bob burst through a door into a courtyard. That's where they cornered him. 5 security guards, 2 men in suits. Bob recognized them from photographs in the archives. Rousseau family members. One of them stepped forward. His smile was cold. "What do you think you're doing, Mr. Marley? Breaking into a private medical facility, disturbing a patient?" Bob stood as tall as he could. His fear was real, but so was his anger. "I know everything. About Norval and Catherine. About the murders. The cover-ups. And I've made arrangements. If anything happens to me or Sarah, this information goes public." The man's smile faltered, just for a moment. Bob saw something like respect flash in his eyes. Then the cold mask returned. "You've made a terrible mistake," the man said quietly. "Some secrets are meant to stay buried. The world isn't ready for certain truths. Do you really want to destroy your own legacy? Your family's safety? For a sister you barely know?" He let that sink in. "Walk away now. Forget about Sarah. Forget about Norval's death, and we'll leave you alone. We'll even help with Sarah's medical bills. Make sure she lives comfortably. Your music career continues without interference. Your family stays safe. Isn't that worth more than some old scandal?" Bob thought about his father, about Norval standing up to these same people 30 years ago, refusing to be bought or threatened, choosing to protect his daughter even though it cost him his life. Bob knew what he had to do. "I will never abandon my sister," he said, loud enough for all the guards to hear. "I will never let these crimes be forgotten." The man's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. "You've made your choice," he said. "You'll have to live with the consequences." He turned to the guards. "Get him out of here, no police. The last thing we need is official records of tonight." The guards grabbed Bob's arms, marched him to the front gate, threw him out onto the street. Like he was nothing, Bob lay on the ground for a moment, breathing hard, praying that Sarah had escaped. Then he stumbled to where he'd told the taxi to wait. His heart soared when he saw Sarah sitting in the back seat. Pale and frightened, but safe, Bob climbed in beside her. "Go," he told the driver. As they pulled away, Bob looked back at the clinic. Figures watched from the windows. He knew this wasn't over. The Rousseau family would come after them, but for now they were together. They were safe, and they had a story to tell. Sarah spoke. Her voice was weak but clear. "I want to visit our father's grave. I want to tell him his children are finally united." Bob felt tears come. "Yeah, let's do that." They redirected the taxi to the cemetery in 9 Mile. The sun was rising as they arrived, gold and red painting the sky. Bob and Sarah stood together at Norval Marley's grave. Bob spoke to his father, told him about the daughter he'd never gotten to raise, about her strength, her courage, how she'd carried his words across decades. Sarah placed flowers on the grave. She sang softly, a song Bob didn't recognize, but it felt ancient, like it came from somewhere deep in their shared blood. For just a moment, Bob felt something. His father's presence, maybe. Approval surrounding them like warmth. The weeks that followed were hard. The Rousseau family didn't let it go. More threats came, more surveillance, but Bob and Sarah had their insurance. The documents with Bob's lawyer and journalist friend. It kept them alive. Sarah's health improved fast once she left the clinic. Her new doctors couldn't believe it. "It's like the cancer just vanished," they said. Bob knew there'd probably never been any cancer, just chemicals that mimicked the symptoms, keeping Sarah weak and controllable. Taking her out of that place had saved her life. But proving it? Impossible. Bob tried to get full answers, tried to expose everything, but key players died suddenly. Others disappeared, records burned in a convenient fire. The journalist friend changed his mind about publishing. Bob suspected threats, maybe bribes. The evidence slowly vanished. The Rousseau family stayed powerful, respected. Norval's death stayed officially natural causes. Some fights you can't win, not publicly anyway, but Bob found a different kind of justice. He raised Sarah as his sister, watched her grow stronger, get healthy, live the full life their father had wanted for her, and Bob wrote songs. Songs that carried the truth in ways most people would never understand. Redemption Song became his way of honoring Norval, of keeping the story alive without putting Sarah in more danger. Those who knew could hear it in the lyrics. The coded message, the weight of real experience behind the poetry, but the world never knew the full story. Maybe that was okay. Some truths work better as feelings than facts. Bob made peace with that. He'd kept his promise to his father, chosen love over fear, family over safety. That was the real victory. Years later, when Bob's own time grew short, he took comfort in one thought. When he died, he'd see Norval again. He'd tell him, "I found Sarah, I protected her. I honored what you died for," and maybe his father would smile. That knowing smile from Bob's childhood. The one that always said, "I knew you'd make the right choice, son." Some promises aren't kept because they're easy. They're kept because they define who you are, what you're willing to fight for. Bob fought for Sarah, refused to let her be erased. And in doing that, he finally understood what his father meant. The promise that breaks chains. It wasn't just about one girl. It was about refusing to let powerful people decide which stories matter, which lives count, which truths get to exist. That refusal is its own revolution, maybe the most important kind. Bob lived that truth every day, in his music, his choices, the fierce way he loved and protected his children, all of them. He never spoke publicly about Sarah and the conspiracy, but he lived it. And those who could see recognized it in everything he did. That was Norval's real legacy, not land or names or heritage, but the example of loving so deeply you'd die for it. A son who learned to love the same way. A daughter who survived because of it. This story of a father who died protecting his children, and children who honored him by living free and loving fully, refusing to be broken by those who tried to break them. In the end, that was everything.